Hi guys, my name is Amrish Diaz and we're here at my office at Cardinal Financial, Queens. We're here with my really good friend, Chris Chandler, a real broker. We're going to talk about what's going on in today's market. It's 2025, a lot of new changes, a lot of exciting things happening. What's going on, Chris?
Hey, yeah, I'm Chris Chandler with the Proactive Alliance team, real broker. Doing pretty good. Found the place easy. It's a nice little area.
Nice, thanks.
New office, right? 3 to 4 months?
Brand new office. We moved here about 4 months ago. We're in Fresh Meadows, right by 188th Street and Union Turnpike. Love the location, close to the Grand Central. Really nicely centrally located.
Nice.
Yeah, man.
Street parking, Queens, but lots of spaces.
It's not terrible though. It's not terrible.
Not
terrible. So tell me what's going on, man. How's everything going?
Yeah, things are well. Just met with a buyer about an hour ago before coming here.
That was good.
Yeah, probably not ready yet to make a move, but we'll stay in touch with them.
Okay. Why do you think the buyer's not ready?
Mainly finances.
Okay. What exactly about the finances?
Yeah, he called and said that he's got about $1.2 million in cash. But then we meet, we talk about everything. I go over the regular buyer's education presentation we usually do. And about 200,000 of that is his money, which good job for him. He was about 25 years old.
Whoa.
But the rest is coming from his grandma. And his grandma didn't fully agree to give him the money yet.
Wow. Does grandma want a grandson? I'm willing to be a grandson if she wants it.
Right. No, if anything, she's coming with me.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but he's got to talk to her a little bit more. And he wanted to really meet and get some insight on the process of buying the house.
Okay.
And then talk with her, let her know that he's serious. And I think he's got a lot of better chance now.
Nice.
But we got to definitely get that solidification of his money first.
Lock it in, man. Lock that in. That in.
But he's excited. So
awesome.
I think we'll have something going on pretty soon.
Awesome. How was your 2024? Did pretty good?
Yeah, I can't complain.
Yeah.
I mean, bought my first house.
It's amazing. Use one of the best mortgage lenders. You're welcome.
Right. Yeah, I went through a couple of mortgage lenders at first and couldn't really put the numbers together right, make anything happen. But in about less than 24 hours, I was already pre-approved with you. So
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So let's kind of dive into today's market and kind of talk about like what's going on and what we're seeing, what you're seeing, what I'm seeing. Like, just curious to see, like, what are your thoughts on 2025? Do you think the market's getting worse? Do you think the market's getting better? What do you think?
Yeah, those are all good questions and questions that were already being asked a lot. Where the market's going? So I usually say we can't really predict what's going to happen, but we can prepare for different scenarios.
I like that.
And the best way that we can prepare is by making sure that our income's right, our assets are right, we're saving up, we're not having too much debt that we can't handle. But yeah, a lot of people are saying that, economists are saying that they're thinking, well, right now they're thinking that yields are most likely going to go down because of all the fear that's going on in the market, like the tariffs, the employment rates. Right now, a lot of people have been, the unemployment's been steadily going up, but it's starting to not plateau, but it's starting to get a little bit more steady.
Okay.
And they also, I don't know if you read about this yet, but they also have found that a lot of people that lost their jobs didn't just lose their jobs, which is horrible when people lose their jobs, of course.
Of course.
But they're finding that a lot of people who are losing their jobs are actually quickly finding better jobs, because the people that are losing their jobs, they're already pretty qualified in a certain area.
Yeah.
So they're finding better jobs, which is helping the unemployment rate not go as low as we thought it was, which means that can affect yields in a way that can possibly benefit the market by having interest rates go down a little bit.
So,
but that's all just up in the air. We don't know for sure.
Yeah. Do you think that Donald Trump going into presidency as of Monday is going to have an effect on the market?
I'd say yes and no.
Okay.
Mainly, I say yes, mainly because of the, what's it called? Like the, not believer's bias, but like when you believe something's going to happen, most likely it's going to happen. Because people think that Trump is going to make something happen, and a lot of people are going to prepare in a way that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then most likely he'll back it up. So yeah, I think it'll affect the market.
I think he's going to shake the market. I think there's going to be a big change of what's going to happen when it comes to the stock market, when it comes to the 10-year treasury.
He's
which
definitely notorious for the big changes.
Yeah, so I think we're in for the next 4 years. It should be interesting.
Yeah.
On a good note, the stock market has done very well in the last 6 weeks. So anybody who's been investing in stocks, or if you're looking at your 401ks, there seems to be a nice uptrend. So that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an interesting year. We're going to see how it goes. Hopefully, for the real estate market, it continues to stay strong.
Right. How are you preparing for the real estate market right now with the upcoming changes?
So, what do you mean by that? In what aspect?
Like, are you maybe looking to buy something else, or thinking about maybe selling, or just holding right now?
Of all our properties, we're holding everything. Everything's rented out anyway. So, we have 2 Airbnbs that we are, using as short-term rentals, which have done very, very well. We've been progressively, continuously earning residual income off of it, which is great about investment properties. We don't have any plans on selling any of those properties because, as we know, like, it's great to own, hold, and continuously gain equity, and equity is the difference between the mortgage balance and your value. And so we've been seeing values steadily increase as our mortgage balance is continuously going down. And plus the tax write-off is amazing. You need tax write-offs because nobody wants to pay Uncle Sam more money.
Exactly.
And so, for me, I'm planning on keeping all my properties. We will be looking to buy more.
Okay.
And so, we're looking at, what options are there and what opportunities are coming about. And so, yeah, that's kind of like what we're focusing on this year.
Okay, just kind of staying educated, not looking to sell right now, just soaking in that equity, and if any opportunity presents itself, then be ready for it.
Absolutely. And I always tell first-time home buyers, like, keep an eye on the market, but like, get yourself prepared. And and everybody has different situations. If you're living with mom and dad and you're like, oh, I got to get out of my space and get something of my own, then yes, it's a great opportunity if you should go out and buy. I always tell people it's always a good time to buy, right? It doesn't matter if rates are up or down. It doesn't matter if price points are high or low. It's usually better than renting and paying someone else's mortgage. It's usually better than living with family. Although granted, living with family, you have the opportunity of saving money. But it's always good to have your own space. Real estate is one of the best investments of your life, right? If you take, hey, if I could put $50,000 and put into a 401k or a mutual fund or stocks or bonds.
GameStop stock.
Yeah, you can do GameStop. But real estate is the best way to, earn more money. So perfect example, I have a client that I'm working on a refinance for, and she bought her place in 2019 for $475 in Elmont. We just got it appraised on Monday, and our house is worth $910. So in a little over 5 years, she's almost made double what she bought it for, and she only has like a $300,000 mortgage.
Nice.
It's unbelievable, right? Where are you going to get that kind of investment?
Exactly.
And still get tax write-offs,
right? And then I have another story that's kind of the opposite of that. About 3 years ago, we had a buyer that was super picky looking at a property. It was a 2-family property in Kew Gardens.
Okay.
For about $900K.
Okay.
Which was a pretty good deal at the time, but they were just haggling 5,000 or maybe 6 or 7 more thousand. Another buyer came in, swooped it up. They said, oh, whatever. Didn't want to buy right now anyways. Want to wait for a better market, blah, blah, blah. Now the house is worth about 1.4.
Woo. Wow.
And still hasn't bought anything.
Wow. Wow. Do you think this market right now, is very competitive? And what would you give advice to first-time home buyers?
It's a very good question. So this market is on the competitive side, which doesn't mean it's a bad market. It just means that you have to understand how to work in this market. And one of the key things is that when you do find a house that you want, which inventory is lower right now than usual, when you do find a house that you want to act quickly. So once you send your offer, or have your agent do the research to find out what price to offer, because you can offer maybe a little above asking, below asking, depends on the strategy that the seller is going for and that you're going for. But once you find your price and you send your offer and offer is accepted, woo!
There you go.
Maybe don't celebrate too fast, because that means, okay, offer is accepted. That doesn't necessarily lock it in.
Right.
Now it's time to get to work. Now it's time to get the inspection scheduled as soon as possible. Hurry up and get your negotiations ready. Already have a list of your the things that you definitely want in the property to work, like the water heater and the gas, electric, that stuff is already, of course, a given. But other little things, you have to already be mentally prepared what works and not. So that way, when the inspection report comes out, especially here in New York, most of the houses are around 1920 to 1960 range.
Yeah.
As far as the year. So of course, there's going to be a big list of stuff that's wrong with the house. But if you already know what you're looking for, you can quickly get everything ready, get contracts out. And once the contracts are signed by the buyer and seller, mainly the seller, then that's when you're locked in and you can start celebrating a little bit. But the key thing is that in this market, if you want to get a decent deal and a decent property, you have to act fast.
So you said something interesting, right? So first-time home buyers are looking at houses. Houses are built between 1920 to 1960, primarily, not all of them.
Right.
And so we all know that like when a house sits for a long time, there's wear and tear, right? Mm-hmm. Would you say that if a first-time home buyer looks at a home that's a little bit older and has a little bit of wear and tear, should they be afraid about putting an offer in and, saying like, hey, this is an older home, maybe I shouldn't put an offer in? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. If the house is around like 1920, 1930, I'd say be afraid. Just keep looking, look for something a little bit newer.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. I was like, wow.
Of course not. These houses in 1920, 1930, even 1900 sometimes, they're still flying off the shelves. These houses weren't built by monkeys. So they're built and made to last. I think it was around don't quote me on this, but they started doing poured cement around that time. And the poured cement, there's the poured cement and the stacked cement, I forgot exactly. But the way that they build properties around that time, they're built to last. And as long as you take care of them well, which if you get a good inspector, they'll be able to help you identify signs of foundational issues and strength. As long as it's well taken care of, then you should be totally fine.
Nice. I always tell first-time home buyers, don't ever be afraid of homes that are, need work, because you can always renovate it and customize it the way you want. Mm-hmm. Would you agree that homes that are brand new construction or fully renovated usually cost a higher price point than an older home?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That is correct. That's the answer. And
thanks for the validation.
And I always tell, listen, like no home is perfect. Every home needs work. Even new construction homes, they're going to need work.
They've been lived in, so.
Right? Exactly. So I tell first-time home buyers all the time, it's okay if a house needs work, right? It's okay if there's a little crack in the wall or if there's a little bit of peeling paint. That's not something that's going to be life-changing. It's a big difference if you have a ceiling or a roof that's got a hole where water is dripping. That's a little bit of a problem. Or if you've got significant mold or asbestos, which all of that is treatable. It doesn't make you stop buying a home.
Right, but it could signal other problems in the house too.
Absolutely, it definitely can. So you have to kind of weigh the difference between is it significant versus not, and is it worth the risk? But anything is resolvable. Anything. You could put on a new roof. Mm-hmm. You can treat mold or asbestos, right? So again, nothing to be scared about, but it's things to consider when you're looking at houses.
Right, and they can also be, when I see things wrong with the house, well, first of all, I expect it. If everything looks perfect, oftentimes that's a red flag. Maybe somebody's trying to hide something. But when I start seeing stuff that's wrong, especially if it's blatantly obvious, like you walk into a kitchen and I don't know, there's like mold on the floor, or there's you see the first wall there, like if it hasn't been painted over. Those are kind of good signs, because usually what you see is what's going to be the problem. And then you can also tell what you find are going to be negotiation factors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel that a lot of times when you see homes that are older, you're going to find problems, and that's okay. That's why you get a home inspection. Mm-hmm. And as long as those problems aren't significant, and yes, they can be used as leverage to maybe have a bit of a small negotiation for the price. Mm-hmm. Because we're in an aggressive market, it's not easy to negotiate price because there's so much demand. Do you agree? Right?
Of course.
Unfortunately, supply is still low and it's slowly growing. It's getting back to normalcy, but there's still a lot of buyers that are out there, and there's still not enough inventory to maintain those buyers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you agree?
Yeah, of course. And I was going to say, actually, I thought of another point going back to like if something's wrong with the property. I would say, as a realtor, to my clients, of course, don't don't be afraid, because there's ways to deal with everything. Even things that you don't see right away, like violations. Oftentimes, like when you look them up, it usually pops up on the Department of Buildings in a big red highlights, and it can be really scary. But oftentimes, it's a simple fix, either that you can do, or the seller can do, or pay for, or something that the attorney can advise you on. But to the competition, I always tell them to be scared. Oh, look at this! Like, you don't want to buy this house.
Yeah.
And then it's so basically, if that stuff strikes fear inside you, oftentimes it's because you've been marketed to that way. So now, as long as you're with a trusted professional, they can help wire your mindset in a way that you're going to actually be winning, saving money, and also getting a good deal.
Yeah.
Without the stress and aggravation.
Hey, Chris, can you tell me a little bit about the new change that happened with NAR in August and the buyer agency?
Yes. It's a great question.
Thank you.
People are still confused about it. So what specifically did you want to...
I mean, tell me about what's the difference between what happened before August and now?
Okay. So to put it in the simple terms, the main difference is that, well, there kind of isn't a difference in what's going on, but there's a difference in how we're presenting what's going on.
Okay.
So basically, the law is just making everything more transparent to the buyers and the sellers. So before, it would kind of make it seem like the buyers are getting represented by a realtor for free. Mm-hmm. But back then, they weren't really getting represented by a realtor. The seller was technically, in a way, paying for the buyer's agent commission.
Correct.
But they're still taking that off of the price of the house. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, the buyer's still paying the real estate agent, because if a buyer would come in by themselves without a realtor, then they'd be able to negotiate the price a little bit lower. But since they're coming in with a realtor, the price is going to stay what it is, because ultimately the buyer's paying for the commission. So to sum it up, before, the buyer would be not paying this
directly.
Exactly. But now, it's just more transparent. We're saying, okay, the buyer's going to pay 2% or 2.5% or 3%. Usually it's between 2 and 3%, mm-hmm. what the buyer's paying. And at the same time, since everything's more out in the open, we're able to negotiate a little bit more with the seller, mm-hmm. and introduce seller concessions in a different way. A lot of agents were thinking that we're no longer allowed to do seller concessions. Yeah. We're not allowed to sneak them, which we weren't doing anyway. So like I said, nothing's really changed for us and our team. Everything is just more transparent.
Yeah. I mean, so buyer's agency is essentially the buyer agreeing.
I missed one more thing.
Okay.
But if you want to clarify that.
No, go.
Okay. The other thing is that and this one's kind of a big deal. And this one is that if a buyer wants to go see a property, they have to now be accompanied by a real estate agent who has a signed contract for them to work together. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing is, that contract can be this is something that might get a lot of realtors upset, me saying this transparently, but if they didn't show their value, then oh well. Yeah. But you can, as long as a buyer has a signed exclusive representative agreement with a realtor, mm-hmm. then you can go see a property. But the thing is, that agreement can be for just that day or just that property. Okay. Or it can be for 3 to 6 months, which is more average. But yeah, at the end of the day, you have to be signed with the buyer to go see the property, or else the seller isn't going to want to show the property in the first place.
So do I have to sign a buyer agreement before you show me a property?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Yep.
Very important information.
Yeah. And before, a lot of buyers would be going and talking to multiple real estate agents, mm-hmm. and then only sign with one or none, mm-hmm. at the end. So that's bad for the realtor, because the realtor can, be wasting a lot of their time when they could be helping out clients who are serious, mm-hmm. about buying something. But also, the new way is better for buyers, because if they're working with one agent, then they know that this agent's dedicated to them. Yeah, for sure. As opposed to a bunch of other agents just throwing you random houses and hoping that one sticks. Yeah. And there's no personalization. It's just a random house that they're hoping that you might like.
Yeah. Would you say that buyers need to move fast in this market today versus like not moving fast and taking their time and, delaying on home inspections and delaying on contracts?
Yeah, I think it's always a good idea to move as quickly as you can while still doing your due diligence. But yeah, especially right now, it's super important. For example, I just had a buyer who missed out on a great deal.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
for a house. It was listed for 1.15 million.
Wow.
But the actual market value of the house is 1.2 million.
Oh, wow.
Right? After some time, I was able to help the buyer negotiate the price down to 1,050,000.
That's amazing.
So that's $150,000 off of the price,
That's
off
amazing.
of the true market value price.
Wow.
So the buyer was still kind of not so sure about it. Oh, look at there's a little squeak here in the floor, or the windows aren't perfect, or whatever, which is going to happen. Remember, you have to have your list ready for the inspection and know what's going to be a deal breaker and what's not a deal breaker for you. And there were no deal breakers. So at the end of the day, they still wanted the house. But they took their time scheduling the inspection.
How long did it take?
About 4 days.
Oof.
When
Yikes.
oftentimes you try to get it done that day, as soon as the offer is accepted, that's when you try to get the inspection done as soon as possible. And we work with inspectors that can do that. In a couple of hours, they'll be able to come out, or the next morning, latest, be able to help you. But yeah, 4 days in advance, or 4 days away, they made the inspection. And then during those 4 days, somebody else came and saw the property. They fell in love with it. They already kind of knew the area and everything. And they offered 1.25 million for the property.
Wow.
And there's only so much negotiation you can do at that point.
I mean, if I'm a seller and I'm going to get $200,000 more, it's kind of a home run. So if he moved fast and signed the contract, he probably could have locked that in before
we
they
would have locked
offer.
it in. And then the other people would have come, and then he would have realized, I just got this property for $200,000 off market value. But yeah, you have to move fast.
Moral of the story, it's not a deal until that contract is signed.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of people think offer is accepted and they go and celebrate, party. No, it's when the seller signs the contract.
Yeah. And I always say a deal's not a deal until you got those keys in your hands, right?
Exactly.
Anything
Yeah,
can happen.
even after that, anything can happen.
Anything can happen. The real estate's so fun. There's a lot of moving parts with real estate. That's why you want trusted experts who have experience with dealing with situations.
Exactly.
Super important. So I have another important question to ask you. Do you think it's a good time for sellers to sell and buy?
Well, yeah, I usually encourage sellers not to sell if they don't have to, or if they really don't want to. But if you do want to, then I think it's a great time. It's a great time. A lot of sellers might be like, for example, if you want to sell your property because you're living somewhere that's too big, and you want to get something smaller, or you're going through a divorce, then right now is a great time.
Right.
Because there's less inventory.
Yeah.
More buyers, less inventory, which means there's more of a chance for buyers to compete for your house. And as soon as you list your house on the market, if it's priced correctly, you'll be able to line up the block.
Yeah.
Because there's not as many houses available.
Supply and demand, baby.
Right? But you might think that people are getting nervous because interest rates are a little bit higher than they were a couple years ago. Well, two things to that. The first thing is that although they're higher than they were two or 3 years ago, they're not as high as they might be in the future, or as high as they were, say, like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the second thing to that is that you might have a buyer coming in who's not going to be worried about interest rates anyways because they're paying in cash.
Right. That's also true too. That's a good point. I mean, listen, what we say in the real estate game is you marry the home, you date the rate, right?
That's right.
Rate's not forever. People basically can refinance in the future when rates go down.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
refinanced multiple times.
Absolutely. I've refinanced multiple times. I bought my first place. I paid 6.75 in 2008, and I've refinanced 3 or 4 times, to a lower rate. So, the important part about it is that you want to invest in real estate. You have a place of your own, something where you can raise a family or have tax write-offs or have something that you can call yourself where you don't have someone else telling you what to do, and you're able to make something that you can invest in and keep long-term.
Exactly. And did you mention you're growing the equity too?
And of course, you're growing equity, which is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think the two best investments that you can make are stuff like monetary, like stocks, bonds, companies, and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's real estate. Real estate is a little bit more complicated to get into it, but once you get into it, you're cruising.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry. You have most of the time you have your fixed rate mortgage. You're paying the same thing virtually every month.
Yeah.
Besides taxes and insurance. Yeah. But you're just chilling, and you can be very confident that over time the price is going to be steadily going up. Whereas with stocks, all you have to do is open an app, click buy, but then you're sweating because you can wake up the next morning
and lose a lot of money.
Exactly.
You know, look, real estate is one of the biggest investments of your life, and I think part of the problem is that a lot of first-time homebuyers have that fear. First-time homebuyers don't know the process, and it's a big investment. Even me, when I bought my first place, I was scared out of my mind, right? Because it's a big investment and it's a lot of money and there's a lot that's on. But
me too.
Flash forward to 2025, which is 17 years later, I would never go back. Owning a place is the most amazing thing that you can ever experience, maybe outside of having a kid. It is incredible to have something that you can call your own. It is incredible to have something where you can say, hey, I bought it for X and now it's worth Y. Cool, I made $600,000 on this investment. That's my house, right? So, those are prideful, those are important investments. There's a lot of advantages on real estate. I think there's just so many amazing things that happens when you own your own place, right?
Exactly.
Versus renting.
Yep, and you start looking at things differently. When I bought my first house, not only was I looking at the house differently, understanding how the house works better, and like really understanding the plumbing a little bit more and the electrical system, how everything comes together. But also I was understanding how money works a lot. And when I was a renter, my mindset was, it's always been pretty forward thinking and entrepreneurial, but it was still just sometimes you get angry at the landlord. Oh, these stupid rich landlords, they just want my money,
Yeah.
But now that I own a house, you see that's not like that. First of all, they're not necessarily all rich. Some of them can still be stressing.
Right.
And it's just the way that money works. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, you're taking a big responsibility and you're learning a lot, right? When you're renting, normally a lot of people are just paying their rent payments to the landlord, maybe some cable fees, and then maybe they're paying their electric, But at the end of the day, they're paying someone else's mortage. They don't get to see any benefit, and there's a lot of restrictions. I have a client now, she's renting in Queens, and she has she's in a 2-family, and unfortunately, the landlords live in the unit, so they have cameras everywhere. So they have so many restrictions on her. For example, she had her daughter come there, stay overnight, and leave super early morning. And the landlords are like,
and they're watching all that.
And they're watching all that.
That's crazy.
And they're questioning my client, who is leaving at 7 a.m.? Why are they staying there late night? They shouldn't be staying there.
Wow.
And they're asking her all these questions, right? And she's like, I need to get out of here. You never want to be in that restriction when you own your own place, right? Especially it's your home. That's not a feeling you want to ever go through, right?
You should feel welcomed.
Exactly. And you should feel free to do what you want, right? So questions like that, being a renter, that's not fun to go through.
Right.
I wanted to also ask you a question in terms of where you think real estate market's going to go at the end of this year, right? 2025 is a big year, in my opinion. I think there's going to be a lot of changes, new president. I think that the market is going to maybe shift. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's definitely going to be a shake. If there's not a shake because of, and if it's not because new policies are in place or big decisions are made, I think it will at least be because people think that these things are going to happen.
Yeah.
Confirmation bias is what it's called.
Yes.
Yeah, you think something's going to happen, so people prepare for it to happen. Even if it wasn't, since everybody's preparing for it to happen, boom, it happens.
Yeah.
So whether that means that rates are going to go up or down, there's a lot of people thinking that something drastic is going to happen.
Do you think interest rates have a big factor on people buying and selling?
I think they do, but I don't think they have to.
I agree with that. Unfortunately, I think the effect does. If rates go down to 5.5, do you think there's going to be more buyers out there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of buyers are waiting for that price to go down to 5.5%, 5%. But then
what happens?
Yeah, exactly.
Increased demand.
increased demand, the price of the house is going to go up. You're going to have more competition. Where right now, yes, you have to act fast, but imagine when you're competing against like 3, 4, 5 times more buyers.
Yeah. Do you think that low interest rates from years ago, from 2020 to 2022, is a big reason why inventory is low?
It's a good question. I think it does definitely play a role, mostly because of the mental game.
Okay.
Yeah, they're thinking that this is the norm.
Well, I don't think they think it's a norm. I think that they're really excited about having something where their payments are super low. It's basically free money.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people are saying, well, since I pretty much have an extremely low interest rate, why would I need to sell, right? Unless I need to sell, going to divorce or something significant happens, you know, they feel I might as well stay put because I'll never get a low interest rate or a low payment, right? Which is not always the best way to think about it, but it's not terrible as well.
Right. Yeah, it's got its pros and cons.
It's got its pros and cons, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like there was a freak accident, COVID, and it caused these interest rates to get so low. And now people are like, why would I buy this when I can maybe wait for the next freak accident?
Right.
But maybe the next freak accident comes in 15 years and now you don't want to buy anymore.
Right. So I'm going to ask you a couple of true or false questions. I'm going to see how you do. All right, true or false? You should always offer the asking price when you're going out to look for a home.
Good question. I can see why a lot of people might be tempted to think that way.
Okay,
so I'd say false.
Okay, why?
Yeah, definitely false. Not always. Sometimes, maybe, it just depends. When I see a house that a client wants to buy or that I want to buy, I rarely ever even look at the offer price at first. The first thing I do is do a 3-point CMA analysis on the property. We do a comparative market analysis as the realtor's approach, the appraisal's approach, and cost replacement approach. And we use those 3 different approaches to find the true market value of the house. Then we'll compare that true market value to what the offer price of the house is.
Okay.
Then we can kind of develop a strategy and see kind of where the seller's head is at. Oftentimes, sellers are just kind of ballparking the price of their house. So you don't necessarily want to just do the offer price because that might not be what the house is worth. It might be what the seller wants. The reason it could be off the true market value, it could be because of strategy or ignorance. So we try to get in the mindset of where the seller's thinking. So if it's a little bit lower, then we can kind of play off of that, and maybe we might come in at a little bit lower.
Okay.
Or a little bit higher.
Okay.
It just depends on
where the seller's at.
Yeah.
So would you say that it depends on how marketable and how competitive the house is in order to kind of figure out what the offer price is?
Absolutely.
Like, if a house has been sitting for 6 months and no one's put offers in, and obviously you'll have to talk to the listing agent, would you say that you have room to negotiate versus a house that has 30 offers?
Of course, yeah. And you can even take it a step further. Well, of course, if a house has been sitting on the market for 6 months, you can assume that they might be getting a little bit desperate. But say a house is sitting on the market for, say, it just got on the market 2 days ago, and they haven't had any open houses or any showings yet, and they're planning to have one during the weekend on Saturday. And the house is going for about they have the house listed for $500,000. But you know in your head that the house is only worth about $450,000 because it's a small house.
Yep.
But it's newly renovated and everything, and it looks really nice. You might still want to offer that $500,000 even though it's worth $450,000, just if you really want the house, just because that's such a popular price point. A lot of people are looking for a house in between that $450,000 to $600,000 range. So that's really it just depends. If you really want the house, you might have to pay a little bit more in order to secure the house.
Okay. All right. Cool. I'm gonna ask you another question. Try to answer it as like 30 seconds. We're gonna try to get short clips.
Sounds good.
So I'm gonna ask you another question. Do you feel that it's advantage to have buyers use a buyer's agent versus going directly to the listing agent?
Yes.
Why?
I answered that in 30 seconds.
What's the advantage of using a buyer versus going to a listing agent?
Well, say you're a buyer and you have some experience and you're buying a house, and you have another client and they come in with a real estate agent representing them like me.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to go up against somebody like me who knows the market, who negotiates every single day, either with my own clients' properties or with my team's clients' properties, or properties that I'm looking to buy. I'm seeing these things every day. I'm talking with buyers and sellers every day in the market, and I'm interested in it. So I understand it. Plus, we go to sales classes and psychology of sales and negotiation classes. You're gonna have to compete with somebody like that. So if there's a lot of competition and you want a chance, then I think it's highly advisable.
Do you also think that basically a listing agent is more prone to represent the seller because they have that relationship with the seller?
Yeah,
And then do you think that makes a big difference too?
Yeah, the listing agent, they might act like your friend because at the end of the day, they just want to get the house sold, but they're being paid by the seller to get the seller the highest price possible for the house. So if you say you want to buy the house for $500,000, yeah, I want to buy the house for $500,000, but I could go up to $550 if I have to, but I'm trying to stay at $500. The seller's agent is going to go back to the seller and say, these guys will pay $550, maybe even more. And the seller's not going to accept anything lower than $550 because they're not representing you, they're representing the seller.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, true or false? Pre-qualification and pre-approval is the same.
False.
Oh, nice. What's the difference?
Well, a pre-qualification is basically using what you're saying about your income, assets, and debt to income ratio. And then a pre-qualification is a more thorough check and doesn't completely verify everything.
Pre-approval.
Yeah, pre-approval doesn't completely verify everything, but it's a more solid thing, and it gets it in writing, backed by someone who has experience, a professional, like a mortgage banker.
Right.
But then you can even take it one step further and get a
Pre-commitment letter.
yes.
Pre-commitment letter puts it through underwriting, so that way you actually get vetted by an underwriter who actually verifies the borrower's true qualifications by doing background checks, which is more thorough, and it's more extensive, thus more verified for that buyer, which has a huge value because when you're presenting it to a listing agent, you can see that they're actually getting approved by an underwriter, which is kind of like you're going to a court case and you're presenting information to a judge. It's the judge giving you that gavel saying, this is approved and this is official.
Exactly. And it really increases your buying power. When I was buying my house with Amrish backing me up, we used a commitment letter and I offered a certain price for the house. And there was another competing buyer who offered a higher price for the house. But I still got the deal because I had that commitment letter.
Yeah, so it has a huge value.
Yep, saved money and got the deal.
Huge value. All right, true or false? You must have 20% as a first-time home buyer in order to buy a home.
True. False. A lot of people think that, but there's lots of different financing options that are regular, conventional FHA, and then there's also non-traditional financing options.
Correct.
That can be more or less.
Correct.
Depending on your goals.
Correct. The lowest down payment on conventional, you could do as low as 3% down. If you're a veteran, you could do no money down. If you're doing FHA, you can do as low as 3.5% down. So you don't need to have 20% as a first-time home buyer. And even a misconception is that people think, I can only get FHA financing as a first-time home buyer. That's not correct. You basically can get FHA financing regardless if you're a primary first-time buyer. It just has to be your primary residence.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, now I'm gonna hit you with a true or false question.
Hit me up. Let's do it.
So by law, true or false? By law, are you entitled to one credit report each year?
That's false.
Oh, so you don't have to just wait until the perfect time to use your credit report?
Nope.
Okay.
You can basically, when you get a professional credit report, you're able to use that credit report, and which is valid for 4 months. But when you're going to get financing for a mortgage, that credit report has to be good for at least 4 months upon when you furnish it. But you don't need to get just one. You can get more than one if you need to. I always tell customers, be careful about running your credit multiple times because those inquiries can add up and affects your credit score, but you don't need to just get one credit report.
Exactly. Yep, he's correct. And okay, so if a buyer is looking to buy a house, would you recommend them to get their pre-approval before they start looking for a house, or should they wait till they find the house and then start the pre-approval process?
Always first thing you do is get a pre-approval. Always before you look at a house.
But what if I'm a buyer and I'm afraid that if I get a pre-approval, it's going to lower my credit score, and then I don't find the house I want, then I got to get another pre-approval?
Pre-approval has a huge value because you need to figure out what you can qualify for. You need to figure out how much you can afford. It doesn't make sense to look at $1 million home if you can't afford $1 million home. It's just a waste of your time and the real estate time.
But what if I'm really confident that I can afford it?
You can be confident in anything. If you're not the professional certifying what you qualify for, it doesn't count, unfortunately. And it's not, you can't use that confidence to present an offer to a listing agent. So you actually need something that documents what your ability is to get a mortgage in order to present a professional offer for a house that you actually love. The value of a pre-approval also is about how much does it cost? How long does it take? What paperwork is involved? Looking at bank statements and are there large deposits? What if I need to get a gift? How do you arrange the gift and what's the paper trail that's required? There's so many moving parts to real estate. It's so important to have a professional advise you on what's needed and how to get that paperwork in time, what's required, how long does it take? All those details are so important.
Exactly. Oh, very good answer.
Thank you. Try.
Yeah, also, there's one more thing I wanted to add to that about the pre-approval, if I can remember it. Oh, yeah. So it's that if you are super confident about what you're approved for and you want to make an offer on a house, the seller is not going to be super confident. They don't know you. Right. And then maybe by the time you get your pre-approval, the house already has a bunch of offers once accepted. Right. And like we said, in this market, you got to act fast.
Right. The problem with the pre-approval also is that it can be time consuming, gathering paperwork, right? The worst thing you want to do is go out there, not have a pre-approval, find the home of your dreams, and then scramble last minute to collect paperwork, such as tax returns, W-2s, pay stubs, bank statements, driver's license, right?
It's already stressful enough when you're competing against a bunch of other buyers.
Right.
Now you have to worry about preparation that could have been already handled.
Right. So the value of that is you want to be pre-approved and prepared prior to, so that way you're going there, looking at homes, fully prepared and understanding exactly what you're getting yourself into.
All right. Very good. Okay. Another true or false question.
Hit me.
Is overpricing a home always a good idea when trying to sell a house and get the most money, so that way you can negotiate down?
That seems like a question for you. But I'm happy to answer if you want me to. So I don't always think that overpricing home is the best strategy, but it depends on the market that you're in and it depends on the price point, right? If I overprice a $2 million home in an area where people aren't really looking, it may not be the best idea. If I'm overpricing a home where the average home is $500,000, which is the very popular price point, and it's a fully renovated home, maybe I might think that's a smarter strategy. You know, it just depends on so many factors: price point, area. It depends on the renovation or the condition of the property. So, look, do I necessarily think it's the best thing to overprice it? Not necessarily, but it all depends.
Yeah, very good.
Thanks, man. I try.
Yeah. See, doesn't know just about that here.
All right, I'm going to throw out some questions at you.
Okay.
So, in your opinion, if I'm selling a house, do you think it's better for me to wait, renovate, and sell the house, or do you think I should just sell the house as is?
That's a good question too.
I try to have a good question.
Yeah. So it definitely depends on what your goals are and how the market is. For example, in this market, since it's a lower inventory market, you sometimes can get away with not doing as many renovations, but it also depends on what renovations we're talking and what your house might need. If it needs a lot of work, for example, you kind of have to know what to look for. Like if you see a dark spot in the ceiling, that could be from an old leak that was replaced a long time ago. So nothing's wrong with the roof. But a buyer might come in here and say, oh, there must be a leak in the roof. That's going to knock $20,000 off the house, or I'm just not even going to buy the house in general.
Right.
So that's something that you might want to take maybe $100, $200, paint it and be done with it, increase the value of the house by $15,000, $20,000.
Right.
Or other signs. Most of the time you want to do renovations that are cosmetic. So it's not going to be too much to replace, or it's not going to be too much money versus if you're doing foundational repairs.
Okay.
But then again, if the house needs foundational repairs, then yeah, that's something that you probably have to take piece by piece.
Yeah, that might be important to do. But if I had an older home from, let's say, 1990, and it's in fair condition, but it's older, you know, if I had the time and the money, would you think that my house is marketable if I upgraded, let's say, kitchens and bathrooms and paint and maybe even floors? Would it be better to do that way?
Again, it's usually case by case, but most of the time, I think you'd be better off doing those renovations yourself.
Okay.
Because when you're going to be selling so the house is going to increase in value. So that's one way that you're going to get more money. But also, when we're not just selling the houses, like we're not just selling iPhones. You know, these are places that people are going to get emotionally attached to and live in. So when somebody sees the house, if it's looking beautiful, they're going to have that emotional factor. That's going to also drive them to even pay more money for your house.
I agree.
So you're increasing the value of your house and getting the emotional competitiveness for the house.
Would you agree that most first-time home buyers look online to see homes, and based on those photographs, that's what's going to gain their interest and make them move forward on, you know, looking at the house, placing offers, trying to get pre-approved?
I would absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in today's world, all this technology, the first time people see a house, it's going to be through the pictures.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, and and that's another thing. Be careful, because you can have a beautifully renovated home, but if you take bad pictures, people aren't going to probably come and see it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and then that whole emotional factor you were counting on.
So that brings me to my next question: true or false? Do you think that professional photography is not necessary in a hot market?
I think it's always a good idea.
I would agree with that. I think it's definitely important.
Yeah, that's something I like to specialize into. I like the photography stuff.
Yeah. I think, would you say that having professional photos and presenting it on your listings, on your online, websites are so important, because that's exactly what people are looking for. That's how they find homes, basically, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, and not just pictures. You can do videos. You can make tours. Whatever you can do to make the buyer looking to feel like they can imagine themselves living there. The Matterport scanning, and then similar companies are doing stuff like Matterport scanning too, where you have the picture online, you can click it and like move it around, and it's like you're in the house looking around. Anything where you can capture that essence of I'm living here.
Okay. I'm asking another question. Do you think it's always a good idea to pay off your mortgage early?
I think it could be.
Okay.
I think that's a question for you.
That is a good question for me.
Yeah, but I think it has its pros and cons. Yeah, it just depends what your strategy is. It's probably a good idea. Well, why don't you take this one?
I mean, in my opinion, look, I always tell people, if you have the opportunity to enhance your real estate portfolio and you have the extra funds, and even if you're paying a low interest rate, your money is better investing in other ways, right? So even if you had a 5% interest rate, you know, and you pay out that mortgage, you're losing all those tax deductions. But you're losing out on opportunities to reinvest into other places. Like, let's say, reinvest into other real estate, buy a multifamily, which the rent can cover the mortgage, utilizing those funds to help you, right? It's better to have two properties that are appreciating and increasing in value over time versus just one, right? So I think there's better ways to utilize your funds rather than pay off your mortgage.
Right, and especially if you see a good deal pop up.
Yeah.
And that can be a good reason too.
Maybe you can invest your money and renovate a property and rent it out, or even renovate it and sell it and flip it, you know? So there's opportunities where you can probably better serve your funds.
Yeah, and exactly. And speaking of moving stuff around with your mortgage, are you able to negotiate closing costs and refinancing?
You can always refinance your mortgage. You know, there's very minimal parts of a closing cost that you can negotiate, right? Your mortgage tax is always the same. Your escrows, your per diem interest, your title fees are pretty much, for the most part, very, very same, exactly the same as is. At minimum, the best that you can do about negotiating is maybe negotiate an application fee and an underwriting fee. But for the most part, most closing costs are a set in stone figure based on what you're borrowing and the area you're buying in.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I got another true or false.
I can't wait. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm sure you've been asked this before.
Let's do it.
So if you have bad credit, is that going to knock you out of being able to buy real estate?
If you have bad credit, you can absolutely invest in real estate. It all depends on the type of occupancy that you're going through. And even if you have bad credit, professionals like myself can advise you on how to improve your credit. But if you're somebody who wants to buy a home, doesn't have the best credit, but wants to purchase their primary residence, you can absolutely buy a home. You do not need perfect credit to buy.
All right. Well, what if you do have perfect credit versus someone who has a good score, like 740? Does that make a big difference? As far as the rate that they're going to get?
I mean, your credit score is indicative to where your interest rate is, right? The better your credit, the better your rate can be. And that also depends on your type of financing, because the financing, FHA versus VA versus conventional versus non-traditional, all have different plays on where the interest rate can land. That's why a professional will advise you on exactly where your rate's going to be. But always, the higher the credit, the better the situation is for you.
Exactly. And remember, like you always say, you're going to marry the home, date the rate.
Absolutely.
So you can always change the rate later.
That's exactly
and
right.
Time in the market beats timing the market.
That's exactly right.
So as long as you can get in there, get started, that's usually the best.
100%.
You can figure everything else out
100%.
along the way.
100%. I always tell people the story of my parents. My parents bought their first home in 1979, and they paid 21% in interest. And they paid 21% in interest.
Ooh.
And they didn't say, well, 21%, I ain't buying a house.
Yeah.
They said, hey, I need to buy a home.
Exactly.
It's okay. And my parents have refinanced multiple times, and now they don't own a house. They bought their house in 1979 for $150,000. Now it's worth $1.5 million. And no mortgage.
Yep.
Right? So the point of the story is the rate was 21%. Did they say, no, I'm not going to buy? They said, well, I am going to buy. It's okay. At the end of the day, it's affordable to me. And that's the main point, right?
If you can afford it.
I tell people all the time, you don't write your checks to your rate, you write your checks to your payment, right? Can I afford $4,000? Can I afford $4,800? Can I afford $5,500? At the end of the day, that's what it's really about, right? What payment can be comfortable for me so I can move on and live?
Right. Yeah, it would be kind of easy to argue, well, it kind of matters more the overall amount that you're going to be paying over the course of 30 years.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, the average time people are holding on to those mortgage is about 5 to 6 years.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. That was awesome. All right, I'm going to ask you a good, tricky question. Okay.
Right, excited.
Are you able to use gift money from family members or whomever to help you purchase a home?
That is a good question. So usually, yes.
Okay.
If you're buying a house for yourself, or you're going to be living in the property, if it's like a multifamily, living in up to 4 units,
Yep.
then you can live in one, rent out the others. You can use gift money, but not if it's an investment property.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
And is there one more that you can't? Or are they just investment properties?
So on conventional loans for investment properties, you cannot use any gift funds, right? Only on primary residence, second home, or non-traditional mortgages.
Okay.
Yeah, good to know, right?
All right.
It's an interesting
So
question.
asked it.
I get that question all the time about
That's a
gift
great
funds.
question.
Yeah.
So another question for you, true or false?
Let's do it.
It's always better to pay off all your debt before applying for a mortgage. True or false?
So it's true and false. I'm going to tell you why, right? Part of our job is to figure out how much money you need to buy a house. So if you're spending all your money on your credit card bills and you have no money to buy a house, that doesn't help you. But our job is to figure out the balance, whether you need to pay off debts in order to buy a house. So for example, perfect example, I have a client who's selling their co-op to buy a home in Long Island. They had up to $70,000 in credit card debt. So their qualifications were very low because of the credit card bills, right?
Don't tell my wife that. She'll keep. she was freaking out about 5,000-10,000.
Oh boy, she'll feel better now hearing about $70,000.
Yeah, she's good now though.
But I advise the clients that if they knock out $70,000 of their credit card bills, their qualifications would increase by almost $300,000.
Right.
And so they borrowed money from their mom, the 70 grand. They paid off all their debts. Their credit score shot up. Their qualifications shot up. And they knew that they were able to pay back that money because they were selling their co-op, which they were going to make $150,000.
That's a triple whammy.
It's amazing. It's amazing, right? So in that example, yes, it was necessary to pay off debts. You know, again, professionals like us, we have to advise those customers and understand the balance, whether it makes sense to pay off the debts or not.
Right. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. For example, if you have, say, a small student loan debt that has like maybe 2 or 3% interest, and it's not going to hinder you from being able to afford the type of house that you want to buy.
Right.
Then maybe that's something you don't want to worry about, and you can use that cash to put towards a down payment.
Right.
Which the interest rate for the house, if it's around 6 or 7%, it's going to be more than the interest rate of the 2 or 3% for the student loan.
Right. Part of our job is to understand some of the tricks and trades about how to qualify you, right? So you may not know this. Car installments, for example, anytime you have car installments, 10 months or less, they actually can be excluded from qualifying. So if I only have 10 months left on my car payment, I don't need to pay it off. It won't be counted as part of qualifying for a mortgage.
Yeah,
it's a pretty cool trick.
I've heard about that, but I forgot about that one.
So that's a big one.
Do you know why that is? Is it because you're so close and almost own the car?
Essentially, it's because your loan's almost paid off.
Makes
right?
sense.
And long-term wise, it's going to be completed by the time your loan is done. So as long as it's under a year, you're pretty much good to go.
Nice. Yeah, most people wouldn't have thought of that. Just pay off their car and then that's money that they lost put down towards a house.
Right. A lot of people ask me, hey, I have a lot of cash at home. What do I do if I want to use it towards their buying their home? So I have to strategize about what are ways to basically use that cash towards buying. I might say, go get gift funds from family members. Maybe you have to do minimal deposits in your account under $1,000 that are not that are inconspicuous and don't formulate a pattern. Part of our job is understanding the rules and communicating it with the customers, and then strategizing on how to make the deal work. Right. That's part of our job. Is what do we figure out to make the deal happen?
Exactly. Let me pick your brain with one more thing.
Sure.
I just remembered someone was asking me about this. What would you say is the main difference between like going and buying a condo or a co-op? Because right now the market, there's less inventory, so there's more buyers. A lot of buyers want to buy something that's cheaper, and it might be attractive because co-ops are less expensive than condos. What would you say are the big difference between those?
So co-ops and condos are very, very different. Cooperatives are basically you investing into a building, so therefore you actually get a stock certificate versus a deed. And typically, whenever you're looking at properties online, the co-ops are the ones that are cheaper in price. They don't have property taxes, but may have a little bit higher in maintenance. The biggest thing, the difference between co-ops and condos is the cooperative board. Getting into the building and the criteria to get into the building is probably one of the most difficult parts of it, right? Mm-hmm. Cooperative buildings typically have requirements such as a 30% DTI. You must have higher credit scores greater than 700. You need to have 6 months of the maintenance set aside for a rainy day. Those criteria are very important whenever you're going in to get a co-op. Mm-hmm. Condominiums typically don't require that. Some condominiums have boards, but they're not as aggressive as co-ops, right?
Right.
So co-ops usually have lower price points with no taxes, but are harder to get into. Condominiums usually typically are higher price points with property taxes, but are easy to get into.
Right. Plus the whole interview process.
The cooperatives all typically require an interview process unless it's sponsor owned, where you have to get approved by the board in order to get into the building. So you can go through the mortgage process, you can create a big cooperative package which requires financials, letters of references, and then all of a sudden get declined by the board, right? So unfortunately you could lose money on appraisal fees and application fees with the co-op to not get even into the building.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
No, of course.
I see your phone's buzzing and everything. Time's waiting for you. Go ahead, close this out.
I appreciate that. You got it, man. I've had a great time. I really appreciate today.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming to my office. I hope you like the place.
Of course, yeah.
You're gonna have to come visit.
Can't wait to see it when it's all finished.
So Chris, tell everybody where they can find you.
Sure. So again, Chris Chandler, realtor with Real Broker. I'm working with the Proactive Alliance team right now. We're about 40 agents, and you can find me at this QR code right here or this link right here, realchrischandler.com.
And my name is Amrish Diaz. I'm with Cardinal Financial. You can find me. My cell phone's 516-860-6238. You'll see my information below. Please feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're here, you're trusted professionals, and have a great day.
All right, thanks for having me, Amrish.
Thanks, bud.
Take care, guys.